they saved me. I know this much. The mermaids came to me finally in the pink hours of my life. They are my consolation. For them, I dove with arms outstretched, my life streaming out behind me, a leap against all proprieties and expectations, but a leap that was somehow saving and necessary. How can I ever explain or account for that? I dove, and a pair of invisible arms simply appeared, unstinting arms, like the musculature of grace suddenly revealing itself. They caught me after I hit the water, bearing me not to the surface, but to the bottom, and only then pulling me up. As the ferry approaches the island dock, the air hits me, laden with so many things: the smell of fish, the disturbance of birds, the green breath of palmetto palms, and already I feel the story loom like some strange creature surfacing from the water below. Perhaps I will be finished with it now. Perhaps I will forgive myself, and the story will hold me like a pair of arms for as long as I live. The captain blows his horn, announcing our arrival, and I think, yes, here I am returning, the woman who bore herself to the bottom and back, who wanted to swim like dolphins, leaping waves and diving, who wanted only to belong to herself. Chapter 1. February 17th, 1988, I opened my eyes and heard a procession of sounds. First the phone going off on the opposite side of the bed, rousing us at 5:04 a.m. to what could only be a calamity. Then rain, pommeling the roof of our old Victorian house, sluicing its sneaky way to the basement. And finally, small puffs of air coming from Hugh's lower lip, each one perfectly timed like a metronome. 20 years of this puffing. I'd heard it when he wasn't even asleep, when he sat in his leather-winged chair after dinner, reading through the column of psychiatric journals rising from the floor, and it would seem like the cadence against which my entire life was set. The phone rang again, and I lay there, waiting for Hugh to pick up, certain it was one of his patients, probably the paranoid schizophrenic who'd phoned last night, convinced the CIA had him cornered in a federal building in downtown Atlanta. A third ring, and Hugh fumbled for the receiver. "Yes, hello," he said, and his voice came out coarse, a hangover from sleep. I rolled away from him then and stared across the room at the faint watery light on the window, remembering that today was Ash Wednesday, feeling the inevitable rush of guilt. My father had died on Ash Wednesday when I was 9 years old, and in a convoluted way, a way that made no sense to anyone but me, it had been at least partially my fault. There had been a fire on his boat, a fuel tank explosion, they'd said. Pieces of the boat had washed up weeks later, including a portion of the stern with Jessie, Jes-SEA printed on it. He'd named the boat for me, not for my brother Mike, or even for my mother, whom he'd adored, but for me, Jessie. I closed my eyes and saw oily flames and roaring orange light. An article in the Charleston newspaper had referred to the explosion as suspicious, and there had been some kind of investigation, though nothing had ever come of it. Things Mike and I discovered only because we'd sneaked the clipping from Mother's dresser drawer, a strange, secret place filled with fractured rosaries, discarded saint medals, holy cards, and a small statue of Jesus missing his left arm. She had not imagined we would venture into all that broken-down holiness. I went into that terrible sanctum almost every day for over a year and read the article obsessively. That one particular line: "Police speculate that a spark from his pipe may have ignited a leak in the fuel line." I'd given him the pipe for Father's Day. Up until then he had never even smoked. I still could not think of him apart from the word suspicious. apart from this day, how he'd become ash the very day people everywhere, me, Mike, and my mother, got our foreheads smudged with it at church. Yet another irony in a whole black ensemble of them. "Yes, of course I remember you," I heard Hugh say into the phone, yanking me back to the call, the bleary morning. He said, "Yes, we're all fine here. And how are things there?" This didn't sound like a patient, and it wasn't our daughter Dee, I was sure of that. I could tell by the formality in his voice. I wondered if it was one of Hugh's colleagues, or a resident at the hospital. They called sometimes to consult about a case, though generally not at 5 in the morning. I slipped out from the covers and moved with bare feet to the window across the room, wanting to see how likely it was that rain would flood the basement again and wash out the pilot light on the hot water heater. I stared out at the cold, granular deluge, the bluish fog, the street already swollen with water, and I shivered, wishing the house were easier to warm. I'd nearly driven Hugh crazy to buy this big, impractical house, and even though we'd been in it 7 years now, I still refused to criticize it. I loved the 16-foot ceilings and stained glass transoms. And the turret. God, I loved the turret. How many houses had one of those? You had to climb the spiral stairs inside it to get to my art studio, a transformed third-floor attic space with a sharply slanted ceiling and a skylight, so remote and enchanting that Dee had dubbed it the Rapunzel Tower. She was always teasing me about it. "Hey, Mom, when are you going to let your hair down?" That was Dee, being playful, being Dee. But we both knew what she meant, that I'd become too stuffy and self-protected, too conventional. This past Christmas, while she was home, I'd posted a Gary Larson cartoon on the refrigerator with a magnet that proclaimed me world's greatest mom. In it, 2 cows stood in their idyllic pasture. One announced to the other, "I don't care what they say, I'm not content." I'd meant it as a little joke for Dee. I remembered now how Hugh had laughed at it. Hugh, who read people as if they were human Rorschachs, yet he'd seen nothing suggestive in it. It was Dee who'd stood before it an inordinate amount of time, then given me a funny look. She hadn't laughed at all. To be honest, I had been restless. It had started back in the fall, this feeling of time passing, of being postponed, pent up, not wanting to go up to my studio. The sensation would rise suddenly like freight from the ocean floor, the unexpected discontent of cows in their pasture, the constant chewing of all that cud. With winter, the feeling had deepened. I would see a neighbor running along the sidewalk in front of the house, training, I imagined, for a climb up Kilimanjaro, or a friend at my book club giving a blow-by-blow of her bungee jump from a bridge in Australia. Or, and this was the worst of all, a TV show about some intrepid woman traveling alone in the blueness of Greece. And I'd be overcome by the little river of sparks that seemed to run beneath all that. The blood, sap, wine, aliveness, whatever it was. It had made me feel bereft over the immensity of the world, the extraordinary things people did with their lives, though really I didn't want to do any of those particular things. I didn't know then what I wanted, but the ache for it was palpable. I felt it that morning, standing beside the window, the quick, furtive way it insinuated itself, and had no idea what to say to myself about it. Hugh seemed to think my little collapse of spirit, or whatever it was I was having, was about Dee's being away at college, the cliched empty nest and all that. Last fall, after we'd gotten her settled at Vanderbilt, Hugh and I had rushed home so he could play in the Waverly Harris Cancer Classic, a tennis tournament he'd been worked up about all summer. He'd gone out in the Georgia heat for 3 months and practiced twice a week with a fancy Prince graphite racket. Then I'd ended up crying all the way home from Nashville. I kept